Hi, everyone. Meteorologist Bill Rentschler and meteorologist Carmelo Lattuca in the 1011 Now streaming studio for another edition of the 1011 Weather Academy. Carmelo, welcome. It kind of feels like fall outside.
It absolutely feels like fall outside. I mean, we've just been all over the place this week, Bill. 100 degrees on Monday. We were in the 70s on Tuesday, close to 90 yesterday, and more 70s today. So talk about a roller coaster week.
It has been. I have been enjoying it, though, because one of the things that happens in August, as you know, is that our severe weather continues to trend downward.
It does.
And,
it does.
You know, we had some thunderstorms last night, and there were some severe thunderstorms, but again, there was only a handful of storms, and as we continue to move forward into August, it's still going to get hot.
Yes.
There's still probably going to be some stormy weather, but it's hopefully not going to be like it's been for the past 4 months.
I'm tired of making predictions on whether it's going to end or not, but yeah, no, I hope so. But I think it's always good to keep you on your toes. Severe weather can really strike at any point in the year. I mean, we've seen that. I mean, December a few years ago, we saw a big tornado outbreak. So even though it's dwindling down, I think it's still important to keep ourselves informed and, could always learn a little something about the weather.
You are not wrong. So again, if you're watching this segment, and again, you're new to the segment, this is kind of a new thing we've started. This is episode number 3.
It is. It's crazy.
And just kind of doing a deep dive into some severe weather, just weather topics. We've started with severe weather topics. But again, on the newscast, we have 3 minutes, 3.5 minutes to talk about the actual forecast. And we can kind of very briefly touch on some of these topics. But this gives us a chance to sit and talk 5, 10, 15 minutes, or even longer, on some really interesting topics that I know a lot of people are interested in and may not know a lot about.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, this is our third week, and, we're focusing on tornadoes in a specific direction with tornadoes today. And I think we'll transition away from that after this week. But, I mean, given the season that we've had, I'm not surprised. This is our topic for the first 3 weeks.
Yes. Again, the 30-year average for tornadoes in Nebraska is 48. We're like 6th or 7th for, on average, the most number of tornadoes in a given year. So far this year, we've had over 90 tornadoes. So again, like you said, hard not to talk about it when it's been so prevalent so far this year. So our first week, we just kind of did a deep dive into tornadoes themselves.
Yes.
Last week, we talked about
more like a case study.
Historical tornadoes, the only F5 tornado that Nebraska's ever had. Obviously, the Arbor Day tornadoes that we had just a few months ago, the Pilger tornado, the Hallam tornado, again, some of those more historical tornadoes. And you've obviously heard us kind of reference this throughout all of these different topics. But today, kind of just a little deep dive exclusively on the not only the Fujita scale, but now what we actually use, and that is the Enhanced Fujita scale. This is the scale that we use to give tornadoes their rating. You hear all the time an EF whatever, or it was an F4 or an F5. And so we'll do a little deep dive into the Fujita scale.
Absolutely. I mean, in the field of weather, these are still relatively new. I mean, especially the Enhanced Fujita scale. It's not even 20 years old. I mean, meteorology as a job, as a study, really still kind of new in terms of the technology, And we're going to learn about the scale. It's very important, and we use it every year, and very important come spring and summer, and I'm sure we'll still be talking about it.
So, invented by Dr. Ted Fujita,
yes,
a very famous scientist in the weather community. He originally, he was born in Japan, and he got his start. He actually studied the atomic bomb and the damage that it did over there in Japan, and the destruction and the patterns and how that all happened, and that all kind of then morphed into studying the destruction that tornadoes leave. And so it was 1971. It was Dr. Ted Fujita out of the University of Chicago and Alan Pearson, who is the head of the National Severe Storms Forecast Center, which now we know as the Storm Prediction Center. They unveiled this scale in 1971.
Absolutely, and we got to think radar started being used in World War II, gave us a really better use of predicting things that are happening in the moment and in the future. And, the scale being invented, 30 years after the end of World War II, so they did the best they could at the time. And it's still revolutionary to think that, we have to base something off of what happens after the fact. So they try to correlate estimated wind speeds with the damage that was caused by tornadoes. And that's what the Fujita scale was originally. And
so, again, it was 1971, and he intended, F0 to F5
Right.
to only be used. I think he actually made it all the way up to like 13 or something like that. 'Cause
Okay.
There's supposed to be a correlation to the Beaufort wind scale
Yes.
and the Mach wind speed scale and stuff like that. But he had only intended for F0 to F5. There was a description for an F6.
An inconceivable tornado,
An
he said.
inconceivable tornado. There were actually 2 tornadoes that he did rate as an F6. Their official rating is now are F5.
Correct.
But there were 2 F6 tornadoes
Yes.
that did occur. And so they went back then, and again, because it was 1971, the NOAA National Tornado Database goes back to 1950. So then
Right.
they retroactively, I mean, they went case by case, and they studied some of the damage and the reports, and they gave ratings to all these tornadoes that had happened. I tried, as preparing for this topic today, Carmelo, to be like, okay, how how did they do this before the Fujita scale came out? And I think it was just like they just kind of described the damage.
No, it had to have been very simple descriptive words,
Yeah.
We're going to see the Fujita scale in just a second, but it's got to be, something from minor damage to moderate damage to incredible damage to catastrophic. But they're so, what's the word, you can use those to describe different kinds of damage, and some that were catastrophic might be considered moderate in different structures. So, like I said, they did the best they could, and it's still a very good scale, and we basically just refined it at this point.
And again, and so it was 2007, February 1st, 2007, that the Fujita scale was officially replaced with the Enhanced Fujita scale, and it can just more accurately match those wind speeds to the severity of the damage that the tornado does.
Absolutely.
Because we just know so much more about
Right.
the materials that are
Yes.
used, that houses, buildings are built with, and what their breaking points are. And we just didn't know those things back then.
No, definitely, and this is one of the things they study at the National Severe Storms Laboratory. They'll enhance the wind speeds in like a simulation, and there's a certain reason we know that like 2x4 wooden planks are now described as missiles during tornadoes because they literally can go through brick solid buildings. And I mean, if you just throw it at something, it's not going to do that. But when you enhance these wind speeds, so I think the wind speeds were estimated to a great degree with the Fujita scale. We've kind of refined that, so some tornadoes that might have been rated one thing can now be rated another based on more data.
And so again, this is just kind of the flow chart of the Fujita scale becoming the Enhanced Fujita scale. Again, Dr. Fujita surveyed many tornadoes, did both aerial surveys
Yes.
and ground surveys. Again, he most famously surveyed the tornado damage in Grand Island during the Night of the Twisters. So again, that's where that 0 to 5 scale came from. But this Enhanced Fujita scale, as we look at just the graphic comparing the Fujita scale wind speeds versus the Enhanced Fujita scale wind speeds, there are some significant differences in these.
And it really starts to go up with the stronger tornadoes. I mean, you're talking F0, 40 to 72 versus 65 to 85. I mean, for knowing as much as they did back then to now, that's actually, I think,
That's
pretty
pretty
good.
close.
I mean, we're talking
I'd say
about
that's pretty
13,
close.
15 to 20 on either end, on the lower to upper bounds. You go to F5, though, 261 to 318 versus anything over 200 miles an hour. That's a big difference.
So basically, you can look at anything that's F4 that's rated on the Fujita scale, probably, and again, the survey is different and all that stuff. But you could almost basically say, well, in modern day, that would probably be close to an EF5, if not
Absolutely.
not higher. So, and that change came about, and like we've mentioned, the quote here from the National Weather Service, we know more now.
We definitely do. I mean, we've even reevaluated tornadoes recently. I mean, you might have heard us say it. The Elkhorn tornado back on Arbor Day was recently upgraded from a strong EF3 to a weak EF4, and that's only a difference about 5 mile per hour wind speed. But you just get new data, new photographic imagery, and that's going to really help you to describe these things. Like, I can only imagine if he didn't take aerial surveys, how they would be able to do this all from the ground. I'm sure that changes a lot in terms of seeing the damage.
And so the one thing that's probably important to point out on this slide here, and really the new thing with the EF scale is the degrees of damage.
Yes.
Damage indicators. That's not something that was necessarily included in the original Fujita scale, but now that is something that specifically when a tornado does occur, that the National Weather Service survey team looks for. They have specific certain things that they look for that can tell them what these estimate what the wind speeds were?
I think it's 27 damage indicators, and I think there's 11 degrees of damage for each indicator. So, I mean, you can do anything from, a barn house to a strip mall to a high school to an elementary school to a 3-story building and 1-story building. Like, they have made it so descriptive, and they're going to compile a lot of things. So they're going to see, based on, like, let's say their degree of damage. I think we have here, what do we have? We have a junior or senior high school. So the degree of damage on the 1 is, threshold of visible damage. So you're going to rate that, and then you're going to go to different things like complete destruction of all or large section of the building, So it goes up in intensity, and based on that, we can take a look at estimated wind speeds. Mm-hmm. We compile a bunch of those, and you get enough, and you start to get an idea of how strong this tornado was at different times. Because we all know from last week, and if you were watching the first week, a tornado doesn't have the same strength the entire time it's on the ground, but we will rate it at its highest point, and we'll call it that collectively.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, the example with that one, again, if you go back and look at the path of the Hallam tornado, wasn't an F4 tornado the whole entire...
No, it wasn't.
It was briefly there as it moved through Hallam.
Yes.
At its strongest and its widest point, but it wasn't an F4 tornado the whole entire way. And again, just really simple things. Were trees blown over? Were trees snapped?
Was the bark ripped off?
What is the diameter of those trees? What kind of tree is it? Is it, like a strong oak tree?
Right.
Is it, maybe something that's a little bit more brittle? So those are the things that they look for. Shingles. Were shingles just blown off? Were roofs blown off?
Right.
Outbuildings, again, a lot of times it's, sheds, barns, things like that. A lot of our tornadoes are in rural areas, so a lot of the times it is some of those more out type buildings that do get hit. Were they blown over, or were they blown away?
Correct.
And they look for those specific types of things to get those to estimate those wind speeds.
Absolutely. And I mean, they've just done so many studies on so many different structures and so many simulated wind speeds that when we classify it, we have a very good sense of that is what the actual tornado did.
And so on this graphic here, again, we've already looked at the EF wind speeds, but again, this just kind of breaks it down. What we would call weak tornadoes are EF0 to EF1. So wind speeds at EF0 is 65 to 85. EF1 is 86 to 110. Those are what we'd consider weak tornadoes. We know they can still do plenty of damage, though. They can shred trees. I would not want to be outside.
No, absolutely not.
In one of those.
But compared to, a violent tornado, yes. EF4, EF5, they're definitely different.
And so the strong tornadoes, EF2, EF3s, winds between 111 and 165 miles an hour. Again, like we said, that Elkhorn, Bennington, Blair tornado, that was rated as an EF3 with max wind speeds of 165 miles an hour.
Right.
What they did is they went and they upped that estimated max wind speed from 165 to 170, which puts it in that EF4 range, which is 166 to 200 miles an hour. And the EF5s, anything over 200 miles an hour.
And I'm pretty sure to go back and upgrade that, it must have been such a close call. Mm-hmm. I mean, just because we know more doesn't mean there can't be really close estimates. I'm sure they were looking at it like, do we put this as a strong EF3? Do we put this as a weak EF4? New data comes in, helps them make their case for a better understanding.
And this is also not something that, it's not something that, like you or I just we're on the survey team and we go out.
Right.
They are trained storm surveying people, and they bring along engineers,
yes,
and experts that look at this damage.
I'm sure. Oh yeah, but sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say I'm sure it's just an even tougher call when you're thinking about the percentage of these tornadoes. EF0 to EF1, that's about 80 to 90% of the tornadoes. Mm-hmm. A 2 to 3, that's 10%. When you get to the 4 and 5, that's less than 2% of tornadoes. Am I correct in saying I think the average in a year 1,200? Somewhere around that number.
Yep, 1,200 tornadoes on average.
So then 2% of that, I mean, that's got to be. It's a very small number. I can't do it off the top of my head, but we're talking about less than 100 for sure.
Oh yeah.
Probably less than 50.
Very, very much so.
I mean, we've only had 4.
We've had 4
EF4 in the country.
Tornadoes.
No EF5s this year.
No EF5s this year.
And it's been maybe a few years now, 4 or 5 maybe.
2013 is the last time there was an
Oh
EF5
my gosh.
tornado. So it's been.
Yeah, that's 11 years. Yeah. Wow.
So does not happen.
No, not at all.
Does not happen very often. And so yeah, that's what this is how we rate our tornadoes now. It's based on the damage that's done. We estimate those wind speeds, and again, there's a team of experts that goes out. Our favorite tornado, though, and one that we have not talked about yet, because it is not on the scale, is an EFU.
It is an EFU. Why is it our favorite, Bill?
Because an EFU means EF unknown. And so if there's a tornado that occurs in the middle of a big open field, and all it does is it chews up some grass and dirt, there's no damage for us to see to estimate the wind speeds. So you could have a huge, massive, violent tornado with 250 mile an hour winds, but if it's in the middle of a big open field and there's nothing there to do any damage, and I'm talking like nothing, like it doesn't hit trees, nothing.
No, it's just literally in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, and so then we can't give it unless there is, research team there maybe with like a Doppler on wheels or something like that where they can use radar, try and estimate the wind speed, something like that. And so, who knows? One of the strongest wind speeds ever recorded with a tornado are like 325 miles an hour. I think it's happened a couple times over the past few decades. But who knows? There may have been one that's been even stronger than that, but it was just out in the middle of nowhere.
Absolutely.
We couldn't see it. We couldn't measure it. We couldn't sample it. So that is entirely possible. Is it likely? Probably not. But is it possible? Yes.
It's a meteorologist's dream. It's a storm chaser's dream because it doesn't do any damage, and they get to just see it scenically. And I'm sure anyone in the public is like, "Oh my god!" As long as it's completely away from me, then I'm okay with it.
Yes, that is correct. And so one last thing I want to do, I want to try and pull it up here, see if I can get it punched up here, because I want to punch up a weather graphic again. It's just looking at the EF scale again, but just sort of the animation of what that looks like. And let's see if I can get it punched in here. Here we go. So, again, you have the house here. House, trees, power lines. EF0 tornado, again, those wind speeds 65 to 85 miles an hour. You're talking minor damage. There's some shingles that are peeled off.
Power outage.
You'd end up not as widespread as we just saw last Wednesday, but you'd kind of end up with some of the tree damage that we had last Wednesday. You're going to have some large branches that are broken. You could have some power outages as power lines eventually come down. So that's EF0. So we kind of had EF0 wind damage across almost the whole entire city last Wednesday.
That was pretty intense.
It was. EF1, if you go up a notch, so you're talking 86 to 110 miles an hour. Now you're talking about entire trees potentially being uprooted, smaller trees, more significant roof damage. You can start to get windows that get broken out of your home because you get a little bit more debris flying around. Some of the bigger branches, power poles, power lines become toppled. So you start to really up it. And again, EF0, EF1, that's what we consider to be weak.
Right.
EF2, Carmelo, that's when we start to, call that a strong tornado.
Larger trees being uprooted, we're talking about entire vehicles being flipped over at this point. So it's definitely at this point, if you're already not, which I'd be shocked if you weren't, you need to start taking this a little more seriously.
And so EF3, again, you're talking severe damage. You're talking about entire floors of homes destroyed. Again, this is why we want you in the basement.
Right.
In the lowest level, you're starting to get bark stripped from trees, which is just difficult to even try and think about, that the wind is so strong it is literally stripping the bark away from the trees. Anything that's basically a standing object is being toppled. So trees, power lines, things like that. Entire vehicles, like you mentioned, are completely moved. EF4 damage. This is when you start getting cars getting flipped in the air and entire homes just being leveled, stripping the landscaping. And I remember there was a famous video. It was a tornado. It was down near Dallas, I think.
I was just thinking the same thing. You're talking about the semis?
The semi-trailer.
Oh, my God. I was just thinking the same thing.
Getting sucked up and just getting, hundreds of feet thrown in the air.
You can only imagine how strong that is. And just to be at the surface, I was thinking that's crazy.
Yep. And so then, lastly, EF5. Basically, nothing's left. All that you have left is the concrete foundation of your home. And you can even have concrete ripped from the ground.
Absolutely. I think I said this a week or two ago. This is one of those, I can't remember the word, but like the parking, the curb.
The barriers and
the barriers. Those are drilled into the ground. Those are getting lofted and
rebar.
Oh my God. And those are getting lofted up. And to imagine concrete being pulled up by wind, I can only
It's
imagine.
hard to comprehend.
It is a little hard to comprehend until you see it. I mean, it's pretty crazy.
So again, that's just animation. Again, whenever whether it's EF0 or EF5, whenever we say there's a tornado warning, we want you to seek shelter, go to your safe place.
Yes.
In the moment, we don't know. We can't say. This only happens after the fact that we can go do a more detailed survey. There are indicators that maybe we could look at on the radar that obviously can tell us whether we think this is a strong, violent tornadoes. There's obviously the ground reports and the ground truth that comes in the moment during those situations. But again, there were a lot of people after the Elkhorn, Bennington, Blair tornado that were like, that's an EF5 tornado, and saw a lot of that on social media, and it's like, as bad as the damage was,
Right.
EF5. Those
I mean,
neighborhoods that were...
There were houses still
really
standing,
hard.
I mean, you have to have them completely...
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying that the damage wasn't catastrophic, I can
It
only
was.
imagine what it was like, but...
It can be even worse.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I can, and that is intense.
All right. Anything else we need to add about Fujita scale, enhanced Fujita scale?
I don't think so, but I think we're gonna... Well, should we tell them what we're teasing for next week, at least?
I think, well,
Are we gonna
what are we doing? Because we were going to
did talk about it. We were gonna do hail.
But then you're going to be gone the next week. And
I'm
you
going to be
wanted
gone in 2 weeks, so I do want to do the Cape.
Okay.
I think it's a really fascinating topic. I think there's great analogies that we can use with it. So we're going to talk about the Cape and the Cap. So just a quick teaser. The Cape is convective available potential energy, a big scientific acronym, but basically tells us how much energy is in the atmosphere to create thunderstorms. And the Cap, don't want to go too far into it, is what limits those thunderstorms from end up being developed. So
But also,
you've got to
like,
conflict
we
them.
need it, too. Like,
We do need the cap, yeah.
You need a little bit.
You do need a little bit of cap, and we'll talk a little bit why, because you could have all the cape in the world and no cap, and things just don't happen. So yeah, I think that's what we'll do next Thursday.
All right, so the Cape and the Cap next week. So tune in. That'll be Thursday, again, right around 11 o'clock.
Yes.
Is when we'll shoot for that. Again, you can check the streaming schedule. You can click the Watch Live tab on 1011now.com. There's just a schedule for the whole entire month, at least a rough outline of when we're hoping to do some things. And so you can keep an eye on that for updates for the Weather Academy, as well as all of our other streaming segments that we have here from the 1011 Now streaming studio. So, Carmelo, appreciate you, as always, for coming in, lending some of your expertise. Really is appreciated. Appreciate everyone for tuning in and for watching. No tornadoes today, though.
No. I mean,
Some rain.
October-like temperatures today.
60s and 70s.
I mean, yeah. I think there's some places in the state not getting out of the low
We
60s.
should have done the show from outside today.
That sounds like a future thing. I think that's what we'll be doing soon.
All right. Well, appreciate everyone for tuning in and watching, as always. As always, keep it tuned to 1011, both on air and online, for all of your latest weather headlines.